Hi guys, hi everyone, Magashi Talks here and welcome to my YouTube channel. As you know, I'm here to talk about my favorite interest ever, which is linguistics, the scientific study of language. On today's episode, I will be diving further into sociolinguistics. This is part 3 if I'm not mistaken, and I'll be talking about language and culture. This is how they go hand in hand, their relationship, their influence over one another, and how language learning goes beyond literal words. And then I'll just be going into my favorite part, which is word of the day. But for today, it's just an interesting fact regarding a specific word. And then I'll close off and then hope to see you guys in my next episode. Well, without further ado, as you know, learning about language, that means you're also learning about the culture, Language is considered to be a direct product of culture. This is your beliefs, your values, or just how a shared society operates. Culture is also said to be a direct product of language. One is the other, or the other is the one. You understand what I'm saying? Culture is shaped by language. These are said to be inseparable. When you learn language, you're directly learning culture. When you're learning about culture, you're learning about the language. Language evolves as culture changes and evolves. They just go together. How culture has influenced our language is also of interest. Language evolves as culture changes and evolves. It adapts to new needs and experiences. You understand? How we tell stories, or rather how we use language to tell stories, to pass down and preserve culture, says a lot about their relationship. You understand? Sometimes in order to understand what's being said, the context of what's being said, you need to be able to understand the culture. Remember when I said language learning goes beyond literal words, right? You're not only learning the language, but you're learning the customs, their beliefs, as I said, their behaviors, their gestures, This goes beyond what we use, the words that we use to communicate, It's the non-verbal language agreements within the languages that we speak, the diversity of it all. You see it in the speech patterns, accents, you see it in the dialects. How many dialects are in one language? Does the limit even exist? But that's the diversity of it all, right? In South Africa, we have a lot of, or a diverse range of cultures, and these cultures are known, and are related to the languages that they speak. Ke Motswana, right, from the Botswana culture, and I speak Setswana, right? As language changes and evolves, so does culture. In Pretoria, there's a whole culture movement, whatever, but it is Pitori. You understand what I'm saying? And they speak Spitori. That's the language. In Pretoria, they speak Spitori. When you speak into someone will be like, hey, when was Pitori? Are you from Pretoria? Because you speak Spitori. And you're just like, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I didn't even realize, alright? So we have now decided, okay, as we are changing, moving to different places, we are gonna use this language, change it and chop it to our, experiences, our new needs, and this is how we're gonna speak. It's a whole culture, it's a whole movement. Spitori, it changes over time, the words, the meanings, how people interpret these meanings, in their different groups, Interesting. And once you get out of Pretoria and you speak Spitori to someone who does not speak the language, they're just like, why are you so mean? Or why did you say it like that? That's just because they don't understand. They don't understand. They would take it literally where it's something very not so serious, Skate chest, don't take it chest, which means don't take it personally. Skate chest, don't take it personally, And that goes into my word of the day, right? I was looking at the word dankie, which is an Afrikaans word that means thank you, which comes from the Dutch word danken, right? In Spitori, we have changed it to danko. Danko means thank you, And it's just like, oh, okay, so we decided, okay, yeah, we see it danki and tanki, but in Pretoria, we're gonna say it's danko. You can use it however you want outside, but this is how we're gonna use it here, right? So you ask yourself, what is culture without language? What is language without culture, right? Their relationship, their influence, one without the other. There's no inseparability here because they are one thing. You simply cannot study one without the other. Guys, come on. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you are identified by the language that you speak, and then they ask you, oh, are you from this specific cultural group? Languages, or some if not most of them, they are, or they point out to a specific cultural group. Just by speaking this language, this is the cultural group that you are associated with. Just because I speak Spitori, they think, okay, I'm within that culture and that's where I'm from. You understand? Forever changing, but they are changing as one. It's like one pot, just two ingredients. You cannot study one without the other. It doesn't make sense, guys. It really doesn't make sense. But this is where I will stop for today. I will end my thoughts right here before I start yapping any further. And I would like to thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys in my next episode. Take care.